Hello, and welcome back to the Going Off Track podcast. I am Kathryn, and welcome to our first F1 Academy episode of the season. We're doing them separately instead of tagging them onto the predictions and reactions because I feel like I have a lot to say, and so we're just going to do that. So F1 Academy, if you don't already know, is the all-female series for drivers between 16 and 25 years old. Many of these drivers, this is their first experience in open wheel racing, which is what we see in Formula One and the other formulas. So this is we are working on building gender equity and ultimately getting ourselves a female Formula One driver full time. Obviously we have had many years, and we've talked about this in the past, that there have been drivers who have done like free practices and tests. So this is the ultimate goal of F1 Academy, is to get a female F1 driver onto the grid full time. So are we going to see this happening anytime soon? Probably not. This is, probably a few years out, but the F1 Academy has done a great job so far with getting drivers, especially their champions and also their vice champions, into other series. And it's not just they're driving an F1 Academy, someone wins F1 Academy and then they're done. We're still getting these female drivers into other series, not just female only series, but other series internationally in Europe. And this is ultimately going toward the goal of getting a driver to be full-time in F3 and then graduate to be full-time in F2, and then of course get someone into Formula One. And we have had female drivers in F3 and F2 before, so it's not like this is new ground. They're just trying to make it a little bit more common, and building gender equity in the sport from the ground up, starting with karting. With F1 Academy also has a vested interest in getting more females involved in karting. So that's what we're here for. That's what we're doing. This is going to be the fourth season of the F1 Academy. It's only gotten bigger, obviously, under the leadership of Susie Wolf, the managing director of F1 Academy. They have continued to grow. They have a Netflix documentary. They have all these fun sponsorships alongside the F1 teams that are also supporting specific drivers on the grid, and the drivers that aren't picked. There are 18 drivers on the grid. Obviously, not all of them can be on F1 teams. So then they have other really fun sponsors. And we'll go through what the sponsors are for this year in a little bit, and also who's going to be driving, who's back, who's graduated, etc. So let's start with the calendar, because it's going to be, we have some intrigue here, and you'll see why in a second. But the calendar, there are 7 race weekends. You get 2 races each weekend. If a race gets we've had in the last couple of years, sometimes races will get canceled and then that race will be moved to the next weekend, so that instead of 2 races, there will be 3 races. So that I'm going to assume that's going to be happening in some way, shape, or form this season, because as we go in, obviously China is the first races of the season for F1 Academy, but the second race of the season is in Saudi Arabia. And we all know that Saudi Arabia is at high risk of being canceled, and that they will make that decision sometime between now. It is the 10th and the 20th of March. So within about the next week and a half. So that weekend's in danger. So we'll see what is going to be done to either move that weekend to another track, or if they're just going to tag on an extra race in any one of the other future races on the calendar. But the other races on the calendar include Canada, Silverstone, Zandvoort, COTA, and they will once again end the season in Vegas, which I think was pretty fun. Last year they ended the season in Vegas, and it was also shootout to the championship. The championship was clinched on that last race. So I think that it worked out in a ton of ways, especially because we didn't have. I was looking at the numbers. Last year was the closest margin of victory. Dorian Pond won by 15 points. The champion the year before, Abby Pulling, won by like 150 points. So it was nice to have something that was like close and competitive. Now, new to the calendar in 2026 is Silverstone. F1 Academy has not driven in Silverstone before, but I think that it's really great that they are. Obviously, it's an iconic track. It's one of the original tracks in Formula One, in motorsport. So it'd be nice to see them have that opportunity, and especially in front of that massive crowd that we have in Silverstone. They will be back at COTA during the US Grand Prix weekend, replacing Miami, which that's fine. I'm okay with that. We all know that Miami, for being the only F1 race that I've ever been to, Miami is still not the best for good racing, but we'll see if this new generation of cars for F1 is going to be able to fix that in any way. So Silverstone and COTA are replacing Miami and Singapore. Singapore, obviously, I don't mind it, especially for the F1 Academy calendar. It's really cool. It's a night race, but I think it's also nice to have like a little bit of variety, and I like that they have the opportunity to go to different tracks. Obviously, it's I would like to think that it's a little bit easier to replace a track for F1 Academy compared to F1 in general. Like if we lose Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, we're not going to get those races back. But I do think that there might be a chance, depending on schedules and depending on what the other support races are. This is completely my supposition. I have not actually looked into this, but it would also not surprise me that instead of divvying up the Saudi Arabian races where, maybe one, in Canada and Silverstone, they have 3 races each, that they might add another track to the calendar from the available F1 race weekends. But we'll see. Now, the thing about F1 Academy is, yes, all the drivers are sponsored by F1 teams or other sponsors for the sport, but there are also actually constructors involved in general. Now, this is a spec series, so the cars are all the same. This isn't like F1 where all cars are different, but we do have different constructors, and each constructor has 3 drivers each. So we have Prema Racing, who has won the Constructors' Championship in each of the 3 years so far that we have had of F1 Academy, MP Motorsport, Rodin Motorsport, ART Grand Prix, Campos Racing, and High Tech. And we know that High Tech is the wild card team. So they have 2 full-time drivers and 1 wild card driver, while all the other teams have 3 drivers each. And we'll see how they do Constructors Championship wise this year. Obviously, when you're looking at drivers, you're looking at the team kit that they're wearing. So the Constructors Championship really matters a lot less, but it is a great boost for Prema, which obviously Prema has given us the likes of like Kimi Antonelli and Ollie Behrman are Prema graduates. So we'll see. Cadillac is new to the grid this year. They will not be supporting an F1 Academy driver this year. They are pushing that off until 2027. I think they want to get their feet wet with their actual F1 drivers first, and then they'll go in and they will figure out who they're going to sponsor for next season. So that is just that is why Cadillac is not there yet, but they will be. Talking about the grid, let's first talk about who has graduated out. So now, typically, F1 Academy, you have 2 years where you can drive in the Academy, and then you will graduate out to another series, whether that's because you graduated because you won or because you finished your 2 years and you're going on to another series. So we do have a number of drivers from the championship, and I did put them in order of the driver standings from last season. And so we're going to first go into the drivers that we are saying goodbye to, then we will talk about the returners, and then we will talk about all the new faces and all the new sponsorships that we're going to be seeing. So first of all, graduating, the driver's champion, Dorian Pon, she won. She was driven for Mercedes. She had 2 very competitive years, and she's also been driving in other series throughout her time with F1 Academy. She is going to do a lot more in single-seater motor racing, so it's going to be very exciting to see what she does, where she ends up. In P2, Maya Voog from Ferrari, she's also graduated out. She was so close, but had some tough races, especially going into the tail end of the season. In P3, so we lost the champion, the vice champion, and the 3rd place runner-up, Chloe Chambers. She was driving for Red Bull Ford last year. The season before that, she was driving for Haas, and she is still Haas's best finisher in the Formula Series because she won a race with them, which I just think is kind of hilarious and is still just one of my favorite fun facts. Maybe one day this season, Ollie Behrman or Esteban Ocon will get a podium, but who knows? I don't know. And we'll talk about who's going to be replacing her at Haas in a minute. Now, Tina Hausman, she drove for Aston Martin. She finished P8 last year. She has graduated out. Leah Block from Williams, who was kind of a fan favorite. Obviously, we love the American drivers here on this podcast. And she is going back to rallying, which is her expertise. This was her first 2 years in open wheel racing. So she's going back to rallying, which is her kind of bread and butter. We'll see what we see out of her in the future. She came in and finished P9 last year. Then hopping down to P11, Chloe Chong. She graduates out of the Charlotte Tilbury livery, which is one of our favorite liveries that I do not believe is going to be on the grid this year, which is kind of unfortunate, but we did have some fun time with that awesome lipstick car. Then P14, Aurelia Nobles. She drove the Puma car, which was also a really awesome livery. Joanne Chacante, who drove for Wella Professionals, she finished in P14. She is done after 1 year. Ava Ignastiadis, who was the Tag Heuer driver, she is also out after a season. And then Courtney Crone, who drove for Haas last year, she is also done. She had her first season in 2023, came back on the grid in 2025. So that is how she finished up her time. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That is 10 drivers on an 18 driver grid. 17 if you don't count the wild card. But that's going to be very significant in who's going to have an opportunity to step up in their second year, which we have Rookie of the Year and highest scoring returner Ella Lloyd, who's the McLaren driver in P4, and her, let's call it rival, fellow former rookie Alicia Pomalski, who drove for Red Bull Racing, who finished in P5. Then we have Nina Gademan, who I think still gonna back the Nina Gademan horse, who drove for Alpine. She replaced Abby Pulling, who's the 2024 champion. She finished in P6 last year. In P7, we had Alba Larson, who was for Tommy Hilfiger last year, but has now moved to replace Maya Voog at Ferrari. So she will be driving in a new team kit. In P10, we have Elba Felbermeyer. She is back for another year. She drove with Stake last year, and when Stake transitioned to Audi, they took her with them. So she is now driving for Audi. In P12, we have Rafael Ferreira, who drove for Racing Bulls. She is back as a Racing Bulls driver. And then this weekend, we will see a repeat wildcard in Shi Wei, who I like this for her because she really didn't have some great results last year in China, so it'll be nice to give her another opportunity to do well again in front of her home crowd. Kind of like how we wanted for Zhou Guanyu for his first and only time at China. Anyway, let's talk about the new faces. So the new faces are, by and large, most of them are not completely new to us. And this is the great thing about the wildcard program, is that wildcard drivers have this opportunity to show off, show out, and then potentially graduate to F1 Academy the following year, which that started with Nina Gademan, who was the Dutch wildcard driver. She was the first wildcard driver to score points. She scored points at Zandvoort, and she then got her debut last year in F1 Academy. She kind of also wanted to be one and done and just, come in and win, but that didn't happen. But I am rooting for her to win again this season. Now, in no particular order, the F1 Academy new faces, we start with Matilda Paz, who is driving for Aston Martin. She was the Montreal wildcard driver. Didn't have the best weekend. There were 3 races that weekend. She retired, finished P11, and then retired in the 3rd. So we're looking for more out of her. And I think that Aston Martin is also looking for more, as I said. Tina Hausman finished P8, but really, she didn't really light it up in her 2 years. So I'm assuming that Aston Martin's going to want a driver that's going to make a little bit more of an impact. And a driver that I think is going to make more of an impact is going to be Peyton Westcott. She is the new Mercedes driver. Obviously, big shoes to fill following Dorian Pond. She was the Vegas wildcard driver, did score points in the first race, P6, retired the second race. But that's still a lot of potential, and that's exactly what Mercedes is looking for. Now, Esme Kosterman, Zandvoort wildcard, she finished P12 in the first race, P7 in the second race. So she continues to be a Zandvoort wildcard driver who has scored points in one of the races and graduated to F1 Academy the following year alongside Nina Gademan. Esme Kosterman, I am so excited. She is driving for Lego this year. So they just revealed her Lego helmet. And you could also buy the little Lego F1 Academy car. It looks just like the one she's going to be driving. I think that is so cool. It might be my favorite livery for the year. Next, we have Ella Stevens. Ella is one of the 3 Ellas in the women's side of the McLaren Driver Academy. They have Ella Lloyd, who's going to be in her 2nd year. So Ella Stevens is going to be driving for McLaren Octagon in the McLaren Driver Academy, but she is not technically being supported by a McLaren team, technically, but still. And then we have Ella Hakkinen, who is not going to be on the grid this year, but she has joined the McLaren Young Driver Program. Ella Hakkinen is the daughter of 2-time F1 world champion Mika Hakkinen. And if I had to bet or put money on, which I don't because I don't bet on sports, but if I had to put money on an F1 Academy driver or a female motorsport driver who has the best chances to eventually make it to F1, I think it's going to be Ella Hakkinen. And so we're probably going to see Ella Hakkinen next year after Ella Lloyd graduates out. So many Ellas. But after Ella Lloyd graduates out, I think it will be Ella Hakkinen and Ella Stevens representing McLaren on the F1 Academy grid. And I do think that I wouldn't say she has the easiest path, and obviously being related to an F1 champion gonna help, but I think that she could be the most likely, and I think she won't be the only child of a driver. Obviously, Kimi Räikkönen, his kids are tearing it up in karting at the moment. At least one of them is so far. And so we will see another next generation of F1 drivers, F1 champions get their kids onto the grid. Obviously, Mick Schumacher, Michael Schumacher, Max Verstappen, Jos Verstappen, even though Jos Verstappen wasn't a champion, but you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, let's see, we got Matilda Pats, we got Peyton Westcott, we got Esme Kosterman, Ella Stevens in Octagon. Then we have Lisa Billard. She was the Singapore wildcard, retired P16, so not great. She will be driving under the Gatorade livery. Gatorade is a new sponsor to Formula One as of late last year, so that's really fun. Williams' new driver is going to be Jade Jaquette. Kaylee Countryman will be driving for Haas. She's also from Arizona, so she grew up a stone's throw from where I live. Rachel Robertson will be taking over the Puma livery. She drove for Ava Agnostiadis, who broke her foot, I think, with 2 race weekends to go last season. So she drove for Agnostiadis in Vegas. She scored points. She also participated in the rookie driver test that they did, where they got a bunch of female drivers, and I think took them to God, I don't even remember where they took them. I think it might have been Bahrain, to have them test the cars. She finished P4, which I'm pretty sure is the best result for a substitute driver, non-full-time driver on the F1 Academy grid. So there's a lot to come from her. We also have Ava Dobson. She was the Miami wild card. She finished P13 in that race, and that was the race weekend where the second race was canceled because of the weather. She will be driving for American Express. We have Megan Bruce, who was the substitute in Singapore. She's going to be driving for Tag Heuer. And as of recording, they are still short one driver, who is TBA, that will be driving for the Prema team. So right now, every driver has announced all of their drivers, except for whatever reason, Prema. It's Tuesday, race weekend starts Thursday night in the States. And then, of course, there's the wildcard driver, and that total makes 18, I think. Math is hard. Anyway, where to watch? Obviously, F1 Academy doesn't have the, same television draw, but you can still watch F1 Academy. They are streaming all of their races live for free on the F1 Academy YouTube channel that are also on F1 TV. So I'm also going to assume that you can watch them if you're watching on Apple TV. If not, they should allow that to happen, but still just go onto the YouTube channel. They schedule everything out, so it's really easy to see and to get those onto your face. I tend to watch them in 1.5 speed when we're going through race weekends, but it's really fun to watch. Love supporting the women. Can't wait to see a female driver on the grid eventually, the F1 grid eventually. But this will be a very interesting weekend. I'm really not sure who the favorite is coming into the season, obviously, of the returners. And I really do think that our champion is going to come from this crop of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 returners, whether that's Lloyd, Pomolsky, Gaidman, Larson, Felbermeyer, or Ferreira. I think it's going to be a 3-way fight between Lloyd, Pomolsky, and Gaidman. I'm rooting for Gaidman. I've been rooting for Gaidman for the last year. So I've been rooting for her since she was a wild card in Zandvoort. But we shall see. I'm just really excited for more racing. And more racing is always going to be fun, especially these cars are a lot smaller. It's a lot more chaotic. Yes, we do run into issues where we have more safety cars than we do in the men, and especially the races are so much shorter that it kind of is are we going to have any racing left? But it's still, it's very technical, but very different kind of technical compared to F1 races, especially compared to F1 races in this new generation. But we'll see. For the racing standpoints, they haven't fixed the race format, which I do not like, where they have the reverse grid race, which is sprint points, but it's the same race length as the full points race. And I don't like that. Add 1 lap to the full points race or take 1 lap away from the reverse grid race. I think it's dumb. I still think it's dumb. I'm always going to think it's dumb until they fix it, but we'll see. Anyway, coming up next on the podcast, we will have our Chinese Grand Prix predictions out probably Thursday morning or late Wednesday night. Depends on when I get around to finish editing it. Obviously, practices start on Thursday if you're in the States watching this. So I'll get it out soon, probably when I'm done editing it on Wednesday. We'll see. Anyway, coming up next, we're going to talk about China. It's the first sprint of the year. Still heavily skeptical about sprint racing. And I think that sprint racing plus the new regulation and all these new rules and these new cars is going to make things worse. So that's going to be great. Can't wait to hear Stefano Domenicali try to justify why sprint races are still good. But yeah, that's what we got today for the podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going off track with me. And I will see you in the next one.